Welcome to the Smart Business Revolution podcast, where we feature top entrepreneurs, business leaders, and thought leaders and ask them how they built key relationships to get where they are today. Now, let's get started with the show.
All right, welcome everyone. John Corcoran here. I'm the host of this show. And first of all, my guest here today is Ross Drakes. He's the founder of Nicework, which is a branding agency out of South Africa. And if you like this episode and you want to learn more about this amazing country, I actually have done a number of recent episodes with residents and former residents of South Africa. So I just thought that I would shout out a few of those episodes, which you should check out. First of all, Rich Mulholland, who has done work with Ross, is a friend of his. They've done some podcasts together. Great episode talking about going from rock and roll roadie to how to be a better speaker and apply better speakers to your business, speaking to your business. Daniel Nell, founder of Nebula Software, on how failing his first business helped him to launch 6 different businesses. Sean McGinnis, former COO and president of YPO Global, current chair of Lumini Network, which focuses on making C-suite executives there and their executive assistants more productive together. That's another fabulous episode. I loved recording that one. And then also Anthony Vidergauz, former CEO of California Closets, who talked about turning a $5,000 investment into a $300 million a year business. So check that one out as well. And a little bit more about Ross. He's a former freelancer, graphic designer, web designer, turned founder of this company, Nicework, which helps build brands. Founded in 2007, has worked with global companies like Nike to award-winning cocktail bars. For the last couple of years, have actually focused on NFTs and Web3. So we're going to talk a lot about that. And so kind of the business case, whether it's a good fit for your business or not, when you should be thinking about NFT applications or not. He's also a podcaster like myself. So check out his podcast, One More Question, really good. And then also the RadEO podcast, which is coming out with a new season very soon. And of course, this is brought to you by Rise25, my company, where we help B2B businesses get clients, referrals, and strategic partnerships with done-for-you podcasts and content marketing. And you can learn more about us at rise25.com. All right, Ross, pleasure to have you here. And first, I want to start with you were a creative kid and growing up in South Africa. And, I love to ask people about how entrepreneurial they were as a kid. And you didn't have access to a lot of technology, computers, printers, stuff like that, but you had access to one. And you had a friend whose mom was a doctor who had access to a photocopier. And I love the application because you found a way to generate some revenue from that. So tell us the story.
Yeah, so I started this business. I mean, I don't think we would have thought of it as a business at the time with my best friend, Edward Martin. His mom was a doctor, so she had all of this technology that we thought was amazing. So she had a computer that we could play games on. I think it was the Apple II. She had a printer, she had a photocopier, and we thought this was the coolest thing ever. And I was given a Garfield coloring in book as a gift, and we figured out that we could photocopy the pages of that coloring in book, and then our friends at school would buy them from us for their tuck shop money. And we had 2 different offerings. So you could buy just the blank piece of paper and then you could use your own pens, or you could spend more money and you could use our Kokies and we'd give them to you to color in.
I love how you had an upsell even. So creative. That's great.
And my keenest memory, well, there was actually 2 memories out of this. The first one was, I remember getting a 50 Rand note, which, I mean, I think at the moment is less than $3, but I had 50 Rand in my hand, and I thought this was the most money that any individual had ever held in one place ever. And I was so precious about it that when I went to my extramural activity that afternoon, which was karate, I didn't want to leave it in my bag because I thought somebody could steal my bag and then I'd lose this 50 Rand. So I folded it up and I tucked it into my karate gi. But unfortunately, at the end of karate, it had somehow fallen out during that session. And I can actually still, to this day, remember the feeling of like loss that I felt when that money had just like disappeared. And that was deeply terrible. So then, not wanting to give up, we kept selling these things and we were building to our next 50 Rand. But we got cut off from our photocopier because we made so many photocopies that we burnt through all the toner in Edward's mom's photocopier. And you can imagine that toner wasn't very cheap in the 80s. So she quickly cut us off from our supply. So we learned a very, kind of valuable business lesson, which is, secure your raw materials, in the long term, or else your business is not viable. So as soon as we lost access there, it was the end of that business, which is a bit sad, but you live and you learn.
It's a great lesson. Yeah. And it's interesting how like the visceral pain of losing that 50 Rand note all these many years later, you can still kind of feel it when you think about it, that pain of that. And it makes you wonder how it kind of like drives us, to get away from that or to overcome it. Right.
Never lose that. Never have that feeling again.
Yeah.
Just try and secure it.
Now, you were a freelancer for many years. You studied marketing design, advertising marketing, graphic design, printmaking in school, and you did freelancing, did different work. Eventually, that evolved into an agency. There's a lot of people that start out with that kind of work, freelancing, graphic design, but never are able to take it to the next level, build a team. Reflecting back on it now, why do you think that you were able to build it into a larger operation?
So I'm not sure how we managed to do it, but it was, I guess part of it was just being super, super keen, so we were all like, I was always super keen and I said yes to a whole bunch of things that didn't necessarily make sense at the time. But then when you look back, you're like, oh, there's a series of yeses that have led me to this point. And one of those yeses is there was a man called Louis Gavin, who was the co-founder of one of our biggest agencies here in South Africa, Gavin Reddy. And Gavin Reddy lost one of the massive retailers here as a client, and they were part of TBWA. And TBWA at the time thought that it was better to sort of take that agency and roll it into one of the other massive agencies that they owned. And Louis didn't want to be part of that. But part of his deal, I'm not sure what the details were, but part of it was that he was given the old office of this agency until the lease ran out. So now Louis had this building which was designed for 200 people, but nobody in it. And he said to myself and my future business partner, Donovan, he was like, if you guys want free office space and desks, all you need to do is work for me for whatever, 20 hours a week, and this is yours. And we thought, oh, this is a great idea. So we started working in the same space together. And that sort of led to conversations about, oh, look at the size of this building that Louis managed to build. Maybe we could build an agency like that. And I can actually remember the night where we planned creating Nicework, and we were like, we're two creative people. We studied together. We need a business guy because we don't, most creative people are like, we don't want to deal with money or deadlines or contracts or like any of that stuff. We just want to be left alone to make beautiful things and change the world with our ideas. So we got our third partner, Ben, and we were all dancing on a dance floor in a club, as you do when you're 24. And we were like, let's start an agency. And we were like, yes. And then we had some tequila shots and we kept dancing. And the next morning we met at a coffee shop. And we wrote down our business plan, which I've got in a file somewhere, which is a single page. And all it says is borrow money, buy Macintosh, get clients, profit. That was like the logic with which we built the business. And, looking back, it was simple and elegant. And what we did is we borrowed money, we bought a Macintosh, we got some clients, and we made profit. Like, it wasn't a phenomenal business, but also, weirdly enough, our needs and our wants from the business were actually quite low. So it survived through those first couple of years because it wasn't like we suddenly felt we needed an HR department and a big fancy office, and we were happy to just sort of hustle it on by. But the business has evolved many times in the 15 years that it's been alive. So,
a lot of change during that period of time, right? To Web3 and NFTs, and a lot of changes in terms of advertising, in terms of the web, in terms of media. All those things have changed
so
a lot.
much. I mean, when we began, digital cameras weren't a thing. So if you wanted a photograph, you shot on film and then you scanned in the print. Like that's how you got digital images. And I think this is part of the latter years of the business. Is I was always very comfortable moving into new pieces of software and new things like as they came up. So I wasn't like nervous to play with the technology. We made a lot of money out of for a long time was building Flash games and Flash animations and Flash apps, and which doesn't sound like much now, but back then there was no YouTube. There was no streaming video, and Flash was the first piece of software that unlocked this opportunity. And if I look back through our history, we were authoring DVDs for people. We were some of the first people to do 3D animation. We were doing Flash. We were building HTML websites. We were doing emailers. We were just playing with any new technology that sort of came along. And I think part of that curiosity and that excitement is the energy that's carried the company forward over the 15 years.
Now, do you remember in the early days, so you said you had two creative guys and you had a business guy. Do you remember where your first clients came from? Did you have to hop into sales? Obviously, someone was able to sell because you got clients. You're still here.
Yeah. So I had a fairly decent freelance kind of portfolio because I'd been freelancing. So a lot of our initial clients came from that pool, but we quickly learned that the client that fits for a freelancer doesn't necessarily fit an agency because, agencies have more complexity and are more cost, they're more expensive and you need more clients to survive. So I think, the lesson there was that the clients who work really good as freelance clients don't necessarily work really well as agency clients. And then we just, once again, I think the secret to our success has always been referrals. It's about really deeply caring about delivering something amazing for the client and doing it to the best of your abilities. And most of the time, people will then refer you on to someone else or come back to give you more. So that has kind of been the secret. And now, only 15 years later have I realized the proper value in building advertising and perception and brand around your business. And I think it's a bit embarrassing to say that as a branding marketing business that we didn't brand or market for the first sort of 7-8 years of our business. We didn't do anything. It was all purely word of mouth, is how the business survived.
Yeah.
But now we've got a lot more intention in how we position ourselves, how we communicate, how we grow in our chosen speciality. And that's where things like the podcast have been tremendously valuable for us, because advertising or branding is a difficult thing to sell and to market, because if you don't want to rebrand your company, there's very little I can do to convince you otherwise. So you kind of need to be out there so that when people reach that point of, oh, I need a new brand, or, oh, I'm launching a new product, or, oh, my company doesn't feel right for me anymore, that you are sort of in their periphery, or even better, in one of their friends' peripheries, because then you get those people going, oh, you should speak to Ross at Nicework. They're totally the right people, which is the way we've managed to actually scale our business. So, if I could go back to original Ross starting Nicework, I would have started content production and thought leadership and brand and marketing ourselves from day one, because I think we would be exponentially further forward now.
One thing I like to ask people about is, how do you know when to branch out and expand into a new service line? So you mentioned, DVDs, you mentioned Flash, you mentioned HTML websites, all these different things. Now you're into NFTs. Now you're doing Web3. But there's always a tension between, we're good at this thing versus the clients would like us to help them with this other new thing, which requires learning how to do that new thing. And should we do that? Should we just really stay within our lane? How do you decide whether to branch it out, whether to start offering new services?
So I'd like to stand here going, I've totally figured this out. But we've made some
3-step process. Here's how you do it.
Yeah. We've made some bad mistakes in the history, and we've made some good mistakes in the history. I can tell you kind of the strongest reason to branch out for me is when you're getting signals from your clients. So if your clients are consistently asking you about a thing, then I encourage all businesses to explore that as an opportunity, especially if it's tangential to your core business. So if people are asking, which is why we ended up doing things like web and social media, they're not core to our business, but it's very difficult to build a brand without having a web presence and without having social media and without having a video. So we've almost been forced to expand into those pieces. Web3 was an interesting one for me because it was a core of something that I was deeply passionate about. I mean, I've been playing in cryptocurrency, for a long time, and I've been deeply interested in it and have fiddled around, in the Onion network and in the Silk Road. And, so it was deeply interesting to me. It was interesting to me personally. And then, I saw this like I could never figure out how to fit cryptocurrency into Nicework because it doesn't make sense. But as soon as this ownership layer of NFTs was there, I was like, this is huge, because ownership is the key to most economic and cultural and social interactions. There's some level of ownership is why we interact with each other. So to ignore digital ownership as a person building brands and building companies, for me, is completely insane. I'm not saying everyone needs to think about it, but, I was like, there's something amazing here.
Mm-hmm. And go ahead.
Interestingly, by being early, we were able to make a bunch of mistakes before anyone really was looking. And now we've done more work than probably 90% of the companies on earth in this space, because we started so early that in the beginning, it was just people experimenting, and they're like, oh, help us do this thing. And once again, that kind of enthusiasm and curiosity comes in, that you're like, okay, well, let's see where this goes. And we moved into that business. So I think it was, in that case, it was a combination of what I know works, plus a new technology was a really interesting thing for my business. But also managing to differentiate by industry as opposed to service offering has been revolutionary for Nicework, because it's always difficult for us to go, okay, we only want to do this piece of the pie, because customers and our clients don't think like that. They don't go, oh, what I need is a brand mark. Nobody comes to us with a brand mark problem. They come to us going, people don't understand us. We don't feel that that we have the right representation in the market. We don't feel that people respect or understand how, cutting edge we are, or this company, the way we look and feel right. And that problem requires us to do positioning, storytelling, branding, logo design, graphic design, web design, video. And if we say, oh, we're only going to do this kind of slice, then it's very difficult for clients to go, okay, well, we'll use you there, and then we'll use other people, kind of to fill the rest of it. So it was very difficult for us to differentiate over the years as to what services we offer.
So let's dive into NFTs a little deeper. You gave a talk recently titled NFTs, Not Just Overpriced JPEGs and Monkeys. And, one of the most famous NFT examples out there has got a lot of attention is this Bored Ape Yacht Club. That was basically people buying and selling images in an NFT. But there's many, many more applications for NFTs, which I think is really fascinating. So talk a little bit about like where you see the potential with NFTs, what types of companies should be thinking about this technology, which, and equal importance, what types of companies should not be thinking about using them?
Well, so I think before we talk about that, I want to talk about like conceptually what this technology represents, because I believe that technology is the least interesting part of this,
Okay.
and the last sort of year and a half or 2 years, everyone's been like talking about the technology. But if you think about something like social networks, they talk about the connections that are enabled. They don't talk about how it is, they don't talk about the layers of servers and how they interconnected and how they use, kind of web services to make your data available everywhere. They don't talk about the technology layer. They talk about the opportunity that sits on top of it, or the output that sits on top of it. And I think NFTs and cryptocurrency have been trying for too long to talk about the technology, to get everyone to fall in love with blockchain and to fall in love with, decentralization. But these are not things that average human beings can actually care about, because, most of them don't need to understand that stuff in order to benefit and have a better life as a result of the technology that's being implemented. But what interests me about NFTs is NFTs unlock true digital ownership. And what true digital ownership is in order to own something, you need authenticity. So you need to be able to prove that this thing is mine.
Right. Which
Now,
has been the traditional problem with digital, is that you can copy it an infinite number of times.
And then there's things like, there's like a DMR and all these things that try and stop you doing that, but they fail, and then there's people like Disney, MC have teams of lawyers that sue people for doing that stuff, but they haven't managed to like do it. But it's very difficult to own a digital asset that you can go, this is mine. You can prove that it's yours. And the other thing you need interoperability, or you need to be able to trade that thing, because ownership is worthless if you can't give it to anyone else, So NFTs also unlock the ability to transfer that ownership to other people. Now, if we look at the history of ownership, for the vast majority of human kind of history, ownership has been a physical thing. This is my NT cutter because it's in my hand. Mm-hmm. Now, for a long time before we had rule of law, you could have walked up to me and punched me in the face and taken this NT cutter, and then it would have been your NT cutter, because you can prove that it's authentic because here it is, and it's interoperable because I can hand it to you and now it's yours. And that's what we had, and that was the basis of agrarian societies. It was the basis of trade. It was the basis of the Roman Empire. It was the basis of all of these things, physical ownership of it. If you think about all of these people that used to like go across the world and like conquer lands and stuff, they were just rocking up and being like, this is mine now, and that's why they were doing it. And everything that's here is now mine. And if you don't agree with me, I have a long pointy stick that I'm going to stab you with, until you agree with me. And that's what we had for a long time. But then in 1880, the Dutch East India Company, which is not a great company, but they were trading around the world. And they came up with this thing that if you have a thought, or you figure something out, you can own that. And that was the biggest leap in ownership ever. And this was the invention of intellectual property. So now I can say that whatever, this song is mine because I composed it, and I can then sell the rights to that. And I can do all of these things. And it unlocked businesses like, like talent management, and all of these things is based on the idea of intellectual property. There's whole legal fields that were invented because now a thought has value and a thought has ownership. So it unlocked all of these other businesses. And what NFTs represent for me is the next evolution in ownership. We have an opportunity to create digital things that we can own. And now you pair that with a worldwide trend of people spending more and more time in a digital world. So there's you and me are sitting here having a conversation in a digital space across the world. But if you've got small kids, they spend time in things like Roblox and Fortnite. This is where their socializing is happening. It's where their communities are forming. It's where they are building things. It stands to reason that they're going to want assets inside the space that they're spending 10 hours a week, 20 hours a week, 30 hours a week, 150 hours a week if your kid is properly in there. So you combine these two things together, and there's immense opportunity here. And what excites me is, there's a saying that often when new technology arrives, people just mimic the old use cases. And that's what we've sort of been through in the last while, is people just mimicking, in the conversations I have, people is like, yeah, but if I take a photograph of, if I copy your JPEG, it's now mine. And I'm like, well, if you go and take a photo of the Mona Lisa, no one believes you now own the Mona Lisa. They believe you have a photograph of the Mona Lisa, and maybe you've taken a beautiful photograph of the Mona Lisa and you can print it on a t-shirt and sell it to someone, but it's not actually yours. This thing now, you can go, this digital thing is mine. And what that does is being able to transfer ownership to people in a digital layer has unlocked opportunities for brands. Nike launched the thing yesterday, actually, called Nike.swoosh. And essentially, the beginning of the technology becoming invisible is happening, and the opportunities for companies and brands are becoming more and more apparent. And what Nike Swoosh is you can buy into this platform. So you go onto Nike Swoosh, I think it's Nike.swoosh, and you buy one of their tokens, which is an NFT, but they haven't called it an NFT. I think they've called it a digital collectible. And by owning that digital collectible, it gives you access to their platform. And on that platform, you can design your own Nike sneakers. And if users of this platform like your sneaker enough, they will make it. And they will put it into production, right?
Talk
because
about
now
re-engineering the way that shoes and other products have been made for a long time.
Well, you are asking me, how do you move your services? How do you know when to move? Here it is. You don't have to know.
Right.
You can basically get people to buy into your ecosystem, let them design it, let them market it, let them find market fits. And then all you need to do is put your entire business engine of building these things and securing all the global supply chain and making sure they're available in every country and making sure there's an advert on every device you see, marketing it. And now Nike's got this fan base, which now has this idea and coming back to ownership, so I can love a pair of sneakers, but if I've designed it, and then you've shipped it to me, I'm going to tell everyone, I'm going to be at dinner and be like, hey, have you seen my shoes? I designed them. Hey, excuse me, strange person, I designed these shoes. So you get this irrational connection to the product and to the brand because people feel like a fractional sense of ownership in this thing. And they also have a tangible, real ownership in it. You were talking about Bored Ape earlier, and a lot of people get caught up in the hype of how much they were and how interesting they were. But what the team at Yuga Labs, which is the company behind Bored Ape, did, which is revolutionary, is they created the series of characters, right? But what you got when you bought the token was you bought the commercial rights to it. Now, this has never been doable at a scale before. Think about Disney, right? So you go into a shop and you buy a Disney doll, a Frozen doll because your daughter wants it. You have no rights to that product. All you have is the right to have the physical object. Like you don't, if you take a photo of that and put it on a t-shirt or on a billboard or in an advert, Disney will sue you, because you are infringing on their patent on their thing. So if you own a Bored Ape, you own the rights to not all of the apes, but the one you have. Now, what people have done, once again, coming back to ownership, because they now have ownership in this thing, they have built hamburger brands, they have built food shops, they have built sneaker brands, they built coffee brands, there's a club in Miami called 11 that instead of paying celebrities to show up, they have Bored Apes show up on the screens in their clubs. Now, what this is doing is it's helping those businesses, right? So they are able to build a brand quicker because people recognize Bored Apes. So I don't have to fight up the ladder. I can start sort of 5 steps ahead, but it's also building the value of the Bored Ape franchise as an entirety, because now, I've been to a club and I've eaten a hamburger, and Jimmy Fallon has one as his Twitter profile. Maybe I'll buy one too, so the perception increase of this brand, it goes up, and it's because of this opportunity to distribute ownership unlocks the creativity of the broader market to build your assets, which is a shift in how businesses need to think, because more often than not, the entrepreneurs I speak to want to protect their assets, and they don't want people to innovate on top of them, and they don't want to because they're worried about losing out on the opportunity of that. But now, because the ownership can be shared between the creator of the IP and the person who purchased the digital assets, there's now a mutually beneficial relationship. So the more successful you are, the more successful I am. The more successful I am, I pass that success back to you. I feel like that was a very long answer to your simple question.
No, it's a great overview, and I have a bunch of follow-up questions about it. I want to ask about how other businesses that aren't Nike can apply these principles. So maybe we can talk about an example around that. But before we do that, this is such a shift in the way that creatives are compensated. And I'm wondering how you feel about this as a creative, as an agency owner, that it's kind of flipping the model. That some people would say that this idea that someone has to buy an NFT for the privilege of designing, a pair of shoes that Nike used to pay an individual to design those shoes, that is maybe a lack of fairness to the creative, and a lot of people are not going to be compensated for their work. But maybe I'm missing something. What are your thoughts on that?
So I think it's the biggest shift as a creative industry that we've ever seen. So generally, most creatives are paid by the hour, which is probably the worst way of being paid. And then you're seeing things like Fiverr and Upwork basically doing almost like the Uber thing, where they are harvesting all the kind of the middle and lower market kind of trade, and they're pushing the price down like at an exponential thing. So now, instead of being able to charge $90 an hour, I'm having to charge $10 an hour, $20 an hour, which then necessitates me doing 10 times more work, which necessitates all sorts of kind of bad things. But now there's an opportunity for creatives and clients to work together, because in an hourly billing model, it's in my interest as the creative to spend the most amount of time on it, and it's in your interest as the client to spend the least amount of time on it. So now we start our relationship in an inherent tension. We're not working together to a common goal. I'm trying to push my hours up, and you're trying to push my hours down. Now, the next thing was like, okay, well, let's do bundles of work. Now, the problem with bundles of work is, as you start creating stuff, opportunities appear, but they don't necessarily fit into the original bundle that we agreed. So now I'm coming back to you going, I need $10,000 more. I need $5,000 more. And you're like, no, but I only had the original kind of budget for the original parcel. So those opportunities sort of die, and they reduce the value of the thing that's ultimately created, unless the creatives do what a lot of creative people do because they care about it, is to just build that stuff anyway and then not bill the client. Now, what this has done for our business is we have an opportunity to partner with people. We have an opportunity to own a percentage of the output of what we create. Because, if you're creating 10,000 NFTs, we can go, okay, well, 100 of them are for us. So now when there's an opportunity to increase the value of the overall pot of 10,000, we know that we're getting 100 of them at the end. So putting in that extra effort and putting in that extra energy isn't something we're resentful of. It's actually something that we are now deeply encouraged to do. And this is an amazing way for companies to start working with creative people. So instead of having that inherent tension from beginning, you have an inherent partnership in the beginning. So now the incentive sits on both sides to make this thing work, and the drive of both parties is different. And it doesn't mean that you and me now need to get into an equity agreement in your business, and now I need to understand how you do it. And, your wife is on payroll. Why is your wife on payroll? I don't know. And you're going, but dude, you're a 2% shareholder. I don't have to answer to you. And now there's all those kind of fights. This way, we're just going, in this project, we are partners. And at the end of that project, we can choose to do another one, but we can also choose kind of not to. So there's this mutually beneficial thing from day one. So
yeah, and I think one of the things that's really interesting about it is that one, it can be multimedia. It doesn't, we're thinking about like a graphic design, like an image of an ape, but it doesn't have to be just that. It could entail music and video and other kind of multidiscipline, which I think is really fascinating. And then also that it can carry on into the future. So, you could have essentially a royalty for that NFT into the future each time it changes hands, which is something that we haven't had in the past. But the other question I was going to ask about was how a different, maybe a smaller, Main Street type of business, how could they apply this? Because not every business has got, a huge following like Nike does.
So for me, I think it's the same as building a brand is doing a Web3 or an NFT project. Is what is your intention? What is the thing you're trying to achieve? And then we always start by asking the questions of our client, like, if you're doing this because you saw the tech and you think it's cool, but you don't really have a use case for it and you're kind of squeezing it in, then don't do that. But there's a huge opportunity for small businesses to leverage the scalability and the security of blockchain using freely accessible things. And what I mean by that is it's hard not to open, the news every month without hearing, oh, Microsoft was hacked, Sage was hacked, all of the people, I think it's TD Ameritrade, everyone's emails were hacked. So information is being stolen left, right, and center, and there's these really onerous laws being passed by governments basically saying that businesses have to secure data and they have to be very kind of hardcore with it. And for a small outfit, you just don't have, if Google can't secure their data, how the hell is Nicework supposed to secure its data? It's just, it's just not possible. And the only reason we can secure it is because we're so small that the hackers haven't noticed us yet, and aren't looking. But the day they do, we are, there's no way that we can protect ourselves. But if you start storing information in the blockchain and leveraging that, you are inherently secure. So unless the entire cryptography of the chain you're building on falls apart, what you have is secure. And it doesn't mean that people can't be scammed and stuff like that, but at least the core data is secure. So that is an interesting thing from an opportunity perspective for a client. The business opportunities for me is how do you extend the reach of your business and get people to own a piece of it? And I was sharing that example of Nike, and I was sharing the example of Bored Ape, and there's an ownership layer in there. And I'll give you an example of a client we worked with, which is a set of 3 burger companies in Ohio called Menchie's Brothers. They claim to be the inventors of the hamburger, and they've got their great-great-grandfather's recipe from 1820 or whatever it was that they started making this hamburger. Now, they had a challenge where they'd expanded this family business to 3 locations, and they were like, now we want to keep expanding. Like, we want to expand our reach because we're now, the next generation's coming up, and, there was 1 and then there were 4 and now there are 15 or, 16 kind of people who want part of it. So the traditional route is to go, okay, well, let's go the Burger King, McDonald's, let's have a stretch of these businesses model, across the country. Yeah, which is one way to go. But they were like, well, let's see if we can use the scalable technology to create something of interest. So they created the Little Mensch. And the Little Mensch is a hamburger that you can buy. So it's an NFT that you can buy. And if you own that NFT, remember, the intention that they came out with was to scale this business into a bigger audience. If you own the NFT, you can buy the original spice mix off a website, which you only have access to if you have an NFT. So you can then make that NFT, they can make that hamburger at home. And the opportunities we're now exploring with them is like, how do we turn this into a franchise model? So if you own 100 NFTs, then we'll give you more access to what we understand about this product, and you can build your own restaurants off the back of the IP that we have built over the many years. If you have 1,000 NFTs, you get like deeper and deeper access. So now they have an opportunity to scale their business beyond their 3 locations without actually having to have more locations, because they've got a really interesting story, they've got a beautiful thing, and they've got a strong product. So now we can use that to create a digital sort of engagement for them that allows them to now speak to people in New York City and in South Africa and all over the space. So by leveraging the ownership piece, they're unlocking a licensing model, they're unlocking an access model that they can use very easily, and they don't have to build all the underlying infrastructure, as in, how do we verify that you have this? How do we gate the access? How do we secure information? The blockchain is doing all of that. So that's why it makes a lot of sense for them to do a Web3 experience with that.
What a fascinating application. I know we're almost out of time, so I want to wrap things up. Ross, thank you for breaking this down in such a understandable way. Really love the way that you explain these really kind of advanced concepts, revolutionary concepts that I think a lot of people are still just learning about. I know, speaking for myself, I'm still learning a lot about them. Well, I want to wrap things up with my gratitude question. So I'm a big fan of expressing gratitude publicly to those who helped you along the way, especially peers and contemporaries. Who would you want to shout out and thank?
So it might sound a little bit silly, but I want to thank my son, Sebastian. He's only 4.5 right now, but during COVID, I was suddenly forced home, and before COVID, I was working from 8 a.m. until sort of 6 o'clock in the evening, 6:30 in the evening. So I was seeing him in the early morning when he was just waking up, and I was seeing him late at night or missing him by the time he was down. And in COVID, he was always there, and he was always kind of around me. And it was this sort of deep reminder that although I put 15 years of work into Nicework, he and my family are infinitely more important to me as an individual than the business ever will be. And the lesson I carried out of that is I try and every single day spend like a deep focused piece of time with him as an individual as he sort of grows up. And it's this reminder that this world that I put myself in, this badge that I choose to wear as a founder and entrepreneur, isn't actually the most important piece of my identity, that there are other things. There's my wife and my child and my family and my friends that are of equal importance. And then weirdly enough, you're asking like what happened recently, but last night I actually had a drink with the man who got me into EO. His name's Rob Dennison, and we've been sort of friendly ever since he pulled me into EO. And he was saying that his son Tom is now 18 years old. He's in his final year of high school. He's going to university next year. And he was like, well, we had this accidental time on Saturdays when his wife and his daughter would go and ride horses together. The two of them were sort of left at home. And he was like, now looking back, obviously Tom's 18 and he's got friends and he wants to go out, and he's now living his sort of adult life. And Rob was like, that time that I spent with him is time that I will carry to my grave with a smile on my face. And I think when you asked me that question, I think Sebastian sort of forced himself on me during COVID, but I at least had the ability to learn that lesson, and I'll never let it go.
That's great, Ross. Where can people go to learn more about you?
You can go to rossdrakes.com, and that's where I frequently and infrequently update all of my stuff. But if you want to see the work that we do at my company, you can go to nicework.in.
And check out the One More Question podcast, the RadEO podcast as well. And quick shout out to PG Geldenhuys, I think is how you say his last name.
Geldenhuys.
Geldenhuys. There we go. Geldenhuys. Founder Shoshin Walks, who introduced me to you and recommended you, Ross. So appreciate that. Ross, thanks so much.
Well, John, thank you for the time and energy you put in this. I think you're one of the most prolific creators that I've seen in this space. So and I know the work and energy that it takes. So thank you. for the time, and thank you for creating this platform.
Great. Thanks so much.
Thanks for listening to the Smart Business Revolution podcast. We'll see you again next time, and be sure to click subscribe to get future episodes.